I'm your host, Akash Huntush. We'll start in a couple of minutes, but as usual, while we're waiting, there's a couple of things that we wanted to mention. Our next bug is going to be held on the 2nd of July at this same time. Today, our bug is a little bit of a special edition. We'll be having presentations about remote working and how the pandemic has affected it in general. Obviously, all the presentations are community content. They are owned by the speakers only and not Bitrise. At the end of the bug, we will be having a panel discussion where our speakers and our VP of Growth, Hendrik Haandrikman, will be joining us and talking a little bit about our experiences and what we see in the future of remote working. As always, you can ask your questions during and after the presentations. We won't be turning on the Q&A tool for now because we just wanted to see how it goes without that being on and just like the conversation flowing freely. So without further ado, let's start with our first presentation, which is actually going to be the COVID-19 research findings presented by Zsófia Kothencz, senior UX researcher at Bitrise. And without further ado, Zsófia, stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. Let me share just quickly my screen. And now hopefully everyone can see my presentation. All right, so as it was mentioned, I'm Zsófia Kothencz and I'm a user researcher at Bitrise. And with my great UX research team, we have created a research related to COVID and remote working. Actually, we had a survey that respondents could fill in, and also we had some one-on-one interviews with different people. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation. I will have a 5-minute presentation, and in the end, as usual, we will have a Q&A, so feel free to ask any questions in the end. So first question, who did participate in our research? We dedicated this research to the mobile development community, so all of our respondents were from the mobile development community. We had 385 people to respond, so it's quite good. And also, we realized that 84% of our respondents were Bitrise users. In this figure, you can see the distribution of the company sizes among our respondents. You can see that 1/3 of our respondents were from a small business, 1/3 from a mid-sized business, and 1/3 were either from a large business or a multinational company. And also in terms of experience level, we had 1/3 of them senior level, 1/3 lead, and also 21% mid-level, and fewer juniors and managers. So in terms of respondents, I think we are very good because we had a very good distribution and we are counting on very good results and realistic results. Our basic question was in the survey and also in the interviews, what has changed throughout this period? Well, obviously, people went remote. So this has introduced a lot of new stuff in people's lives. The first and very interesting part is the social aspect of all of these changes. Now let's jump into all those changes related to this. One person said, quote, "I don't exercise." Another person also mentioned, "I must make my own food. That is a daily struggle." And this is also reflected in the statistics. In this figure, you can see that the number one issue with these social difficulties is the social life is missing. It's very high. Also, they had problems with communicating and sharing ideas with each other, collaborating with each other. And also you can see here that only 69 people said that none of these issues are happening with them, which is quite low. So everyone has something going on. But also we wanted to know if there are any positive aspects of this situation. And I started to read the comments and I saw that no commuting is a big plus. And then I read through all the comments and I saw that everyone is saying no commuting and no commuting. So I understand people really hate commuting, and it's a big plus that we don't have to do it every day and we are saving a lot of time. Now let's jump into the work aspect of these remote work changes. A person said, due to some private situations, for example, kids taking care of parents, the working hours have gradually shifted over a larger time span, as it's spread out over the whole day from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Another person said, quote, we use delivery services to send test devices to employees, but sometimes people are not in the same city, so it can take half a day. And this is in the statistics as well. As you can see, the biggest problem is the presence of others in the work environment. For example, kids, parents, or pets. And what is interesting in this mobile development community that they are testing on test devices, and they are missing those because previously they easily could share these test devices because they were in the same building or even in the same room. But now they are apart from each other and it's a hassle. Also, they might have uncomfortable working conditions, for example, private space or light source, or maybe lack of infrastructure and network issues. I think we deal with it on a daily basis. And only 99 people said that none of these issues are happening with them, which is quite low as well. So everyone is affected with their day-to-day remote work life. Now, we have talked about the social aspect, the work aspect, but we were also curious about the company aspect of this. What you can see in this figure is if any of project changes were going on during this period. And what you can see that only 100 people said that they didn't have any project changes. The other people had some sort of change. For example, they might have postponed or rescheduled project or even new projects, or they might extending their project or canceled. So lots of changes regarding projects. We were also curious about the effect of COVID on different product areas. So we asked which product area they are working on, for example, tourism, travel, sports, IT, food and drink, and so on and so forth. And we also asked the effect of COVID or the amount of effect of COVID on these different areas. So what you can see here is that the biggest hit was taken by the tourism travel. They had a major effect on this. And now I can imagine that you are thinking that, no shit, Sherlock, everyone knows that the travel and tourism area was hit seriously. But what we can also see in this figure is not just that. We can also see that most of the areas are on level 6 out of 10, which is quite huge. So everyone was affected by this. And also we can see that the finance was a bit less affected. It's on 5 at this moment. And the tooling aspect is also an interesting part, as we are all using some sort of tools, either communication or Git or anything. A person said, quote, we already had a bi-coastal team with some full-time remote team members, so haven't had to change much. And basically, this is what the statistics shows, that most of our people didn't change anything regarding tools. If they had to, then they were searching and evaluating new tools and services because they needed to. And this includes also communication tools, because at this point, if someone didn't have a very good communication tool, they sure do need it right now. And we also heard in the interviews that they are canceling unnecessary tools and services because they want to cut costs. So they are going through each and every tool maybe they have neglected for a while, and they are canceling the ones that are not really necessary. This was a short introduction of our research, and now I'm up for any questions that you have.
Thanks, Zsófia, for the presentation. I'm also here, just helping out. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Wait just a second more. Yeah, Ampavis was asking how the survey was conducted because he missed the beginning of it.
Yeah, so basically it was a survey, and also we had one-on-one interviews with people. We asked questions, and it was in a qualitative manner. So the survey was basically, we constructed quite a big survey. It took almost 15 minutes to fill it in, and then we shared it in a blog post, and we dedicated to the mobile development community. And then the 389-ish people filled it in, and then we analyzed the data.
Our next question comes from Denis. He's asking whether you're going to continue this research and monitor the dynamic.
Yeah, great question. So we were talking about this just like in the last couple of days, and we are planning to continue doing so because the situation is changing over time, and we really would like to see if there are any changes over this amount of time, because I think we did this survey 3 weeks ago, and we will wait a couple of more, and then we will repeat it, I think.
All right. Rick is asking whether the raw data will be shared somewhere.
Yes, it is going to be shared without any personal data or anything. It will be open to everyone.
All right. We also have a question from Devanshi. What sampling technique did you use in order to select your participants?
So we just posted the survey out there, and we said that if you are in a mobile development community, you should be please fill it in, and then everyone could basically respond to it. But then when the data came in, we flagged the ones that are not relevant to us, because we asked a bunch of questions in order to be able to select the ones that are relevant to us, so we could decide whether someone is good or not good in terms of this topic.
All right. We also have a question from Teraith, who's asking what happened with someone if they don't have internet. I assume that refers to cases where that was the problematic factor.
Yeah, we didn't ask this question to people really. So, but we have experienced that people who don't have internet, they are using the mobile internet, or if they don't have any of that, they just can't continue to work, and that's a big struggle, as we can see that they have. They said that network issues is a constant problem.
Right. Just to specify, this is the survey was basically about how remote working changed due to COVID-19. So yes, obviously, other people are also affected by this, but this was aimed at that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about this, but we didn't ask this to the entire society. We dedicated to developers and anyone who is working in the mobile development industry. So they must have internet connection because they are working like that.
Yeah. All right. If we don't have any other questions, we have another one from Pratik. Also, the internet issue is one which will contribute to the person being less productive during those hours. Yeah, I guess that's related to connectivity issues, which a lot of us are facing at the moment.
I really think that while I was presenting you these results, you all can empathize with these problems, because I think we all experience this on a daily basis. So yes, they are having less productive days and fragmented days, because they have to wait, and then they have to work overtime in order to get back to work. So it's a hassle also.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Zsófia, for the presentation, and thanks everyone for the questions.
Thank you.
Will be moving on to our next presenter, who will be Jan-Erik Lorfeo. Jan, you should be able to switch on your mic and video now. A couple of words about Jan. His presentation is going to be titled "Why Seniority Titles Do Not Matter." Jan is joining us from Germany. He works at Adesso Mobile Solutions. He's a passionate iOS and Swift developer located in Dortmund, Germany. And when he's not working on iOS apps, he wanders in the JavaScript world.
Okay, so thank you for joining and thank you for having me, actually, Bitrise. Yeah, so today I want to talk a bit about seniority titles and why, in my opinion, they actually do or should not matter. And this, of course, is a hot take for many, I guess. And so everyone's, of course, entitled to their own opinion. But I will try to show you why, from my experience, this actually could be the case. And because the theme is remote office, or like remote, on how the coronavirus actually affected our working, I try to show you this on an example which I actually lived through when the coronavirus hit our company. So yeah, as Akos already said, I'm young. I'm living in Germany, and I'm working I recently joined Adesso Mobile as an iOS engineer, and there we of course develop iOS and Android applications for different customers. So yeah. As I told you, I live in Germany, and Germany is a great place. It's very famous for giving people beer, pretzels, and different other kind of stuff. Great football, of course. But what Germany is unfortunately also famous for is their relucency when it comes to new tech, or when it comes to tech in general. So to give you a bit of context how remote working functions in Germany, I will show you some numbers so that you can imagine how actually how remote work is received in Germany. So if you look at the numbers, 64% of people in Germany that want to have work or that already work want to have a remote job offer or an option to be remote. So this is kind of like more than 50%. Therefore, it's quite thought after. So you would say that if the requests are that big, you would suggest that the companies are responding to that. But if you look at the numbers, only 39% of the companies actually offer remote jobs in Germany. So this is, when you compare it especially to countries like the US or the UK, this is quite a low number. And this is a traditional German thing, because back in Germany, tech and tech companies in general are very traditional when it comes to working. So especially the company I joined back in the day before I went to Adesso was quite traditional when it came to on-site working. So it's not unusual that you don't have the opportunity to work from remote, especially when you look at the third number, which is basically how many jobs actually offer remote options. So when you look at job offers, only 1.5% of all job offers actually include an option to work remotely. So this is quite low in my opinion. So therefore, just to give you a bit of context, Germany is traditionally quite reluctant to accept remote working in general. So just get in that mindset and think about how we could be prepared for something that requires us to work from remote, basically. Yeah, so as I told you, I want to tell you a bit about my experience with the coronavirus and working from remote. And so this story actually didn't start at when the virus hit me, with our company, but at my introduction, or at my job interview, if you will. So we were discussing salary and everything, and there was a question in my mind I wanted to ask, because for me it was quite important. So I was asking, well, if I want to search for new technologies, or if I want to try to help someone discover new technologies, or if I want to discover, let's say, our applications and everything, who should I ask, or how's the process? Because normally you would expect there is a competence center or anything like that, that, for example, tries to find new ways to develop software or anything like that. And the answer was quite interesting. I won't forget this answer because my boss was kind of like, let's say, he was like strange with that, because he was really wondering why I did ask the question, because his answer was basically, the senior developers know everything, ask them. And this was strange for me, because I was like, well, so they know everything, right? So I can ask everything about software and everything, I can ask them and they will give me the answer. So this for me created kind of like this situation where you, as a junior developer or a midway developer, which I was back in the day, you look at them like they're some kind of god, you know, and the senior developer like doesn't go to you, but he just waits for you to come to him and then he will answer your question. And so this was kind of like a unidirectional flow where I had a question and I go to him and ask him, but I didn't want to disturb him, so I really did just ask like hard questions. But the easy questions, I searched hours and hours before I actually found the solution I was hoping for. So I wasted a bit of time there, but I never really had another conversation with him. I just wanted to ask questions and then I got answers, but there was no personal connection, not anything. So what that taught me basically was that, well, titles can create barriers, and this was a barrier that I had. So the problem was that he was my superior, let's say, you know, because he was put on a pedestal by everyone, because he's like the best developer ever. He's a senior developer. He's very important. So he never came to me for a question or something like that, or just my opinion, because everyone said, well, he knows everything, or the senior developers know everything. So they were kind of like nothing short of gods. So this was a problem, because for me, the communication was quite difficult, because I didn't know what to ask him or what can I ask him, because I didn't want to waste his time, basically. And so for me, this created a barrier. And I observed that in the whole company I worked for, this was actually the case. So many junior or midway developers didn't actually talk with seniors that much. So there was no collaboration actually going on because of these barriers, because they were held in such high regard because of their title, basically. So what then happened, I stayed there for one more year and everything. And what then happened, of course, as we all know, was the coronavirus. So what that meant was that now we had to do home office, which basically was never done before in that way. So there were a couple of people who had contracts which could lead to a bit more home office for them. But in general, home office was not well seen at my old company. So it was I always had someone, I could always ask someone on the floor and everything like that. But remote really, this coronavirus really changed how we had to work. And you, of course, see that as well when you look at the headlines. So many different headlines that actually tried to show you how to manage home office, how to manage being home and to work productively and everything. So these whole articles were like really helpful, but also really stressful to read, because now you had to manage a completely new situation, especially as a senior developer, for example, who had like much experience in the field and who was at the company for like 15 or 20 years. Because you see, in Germany, the duration of employment usually goes around over 10 years. So one person stays at one company for over 10 years. So therefore, there were many senior developers. And for all of us, it was quite a new situation. It was quite interesting to deal with, especially when you look at what we had to do, because many people were like, well, I don't use this tool, I don't use that tool, I just use my tools. But now you had to especially use the tools the company provided you in a specific way in order to get productive. And this was new for everyone. And Zsófia's study really shows that there were many different factors that played now and that leveled the playing field, if you will, because at first we just talked about technical things, and the senior always was superior because he, of course, was the senior. But now, with this new situation, new software that we had to use, new experiences, new environments, the questions shifted completely from a technical point of view to, let's say, a non-technical point of view. So questions that everyone could answer. So things like, how do you cope with the situation? How do you stay productive? How do you stay happy, and how do you stay motivated? Because many people were not really familiar with anti-socializing, as Zsófia greatly explained. This was the first and main issue. No one went to the office anymore, so there were no socializing going on. Therefore, we could not really speak. Therefore, we could not really speak to each other. What then happened was that usually people who didn't listen to each other, or who just didn't meet because of their titles, because of their positions and everything, started to meet and talk about the issues they had. And the great thing about that was that everyone had the same issue: how to stay productive, how to cope, and what to do. And this actually led to a kind of a collaboration, which said, well, let's meet anyway. Let's try to learn from it. Let's develop together. Let's start things like pair programming or coding dojos, which could help other people to stay on the newest topics of tech, or to just learn patterns or anything like that. So what we actually did was we started speaking to each other, and especially the seniors noticed that people who just started at the company, who maybe were juniors, actually had quite a bit of knowledge, so they could learn from that. So we really started collaborating in different projects in different areas, and personally and professionally. And this was amazing to see, because our productivity before the virus and after the virus, or while the virus is still happening, was really different. Because at first, of course, it was quite down, but now, when I left the company, it stayed really high, and it was really productive, and we were all quite happy because we found ways to engage with each other, even though this crisis happened, because we actually started collaborating more, because we had the playing fields were leveled. So for me, one argument why seniority titles should not matter in a company is anyone can learn from anyone. And this is one of the most important principles, in my opinion. When you are in a company, like as a senior, don't try to do it your way. Try to listen to newcomers. Try to listen to someone who just experienced the technology. That's to see his viewpoint. Or as a junior, don't be afraid to ask questions you find yourself stupid, because it's important that we can learn from each other, because each question helps us to basically be better. And this should not be a senior matter. This should not be a junior matter, but this should be a developer or a personal matter. So this really showed with COVID-19, with the coronavirus, and with everything that happened there. So this, for me, is one argument why seniority titles should not matter that much, that they matter actually in Germany, for example. Yeah, so these are a couple of links. I've linked the statistics in German, of course, that I just showed you, and some articles of how to cope with home office and everything that helped us to go through the pandemic, and to motivate each other to stay healthy and to stay productive. And I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thank you for listening. And of course, I'm now open for questions. Thank you
so much, Jan. That was amazing. I really loved it. And it's going to be really interesting to talk about some of the points regarding collaboration later on in the panel, and see what everyone else's experiences were, because I know that we certainly experienced something similar to what you just said. And also, we will be sharing all of the links included in our dedicated Slack channel, and we'll also put them in the YouTube description so that everyone can check everything out. Let's see the questions. From Melissa, how do you handle pair programming remotely?
Yeah, very interesting question. So we had two different parts with that. So at first, of course, we used tools like Visual Studio Code, which basically offers you features like remotely working with each other. So there is a feature called Visual Studio Live Show, which we used extensively. And also we tried to use things like WebEx or Teams, where we started sharing screens together and worked together on our project basically. And this was done in like a format where we like switched every half an hour, for example, or where we just try to stay on top of each other with the coding. So the internet connection was quite difficult, but we actually managed to basically get the essence of everything. So we try to stay productive that way. Yes.
Awesome. Multiple people are typing, so let's just wait a second to see whether there's any other questions. But if there aren't, then thank you again, Jan.
Thanks.
We'll talk later in the panel, and we will be moving on to our next presenter, who is going to be Denis Stark. Denis, I've moved you into presenter mode, so you should be able to turn on your video and audio. A few words about Denis. His presentation is going to be titled Resilient Tech Lifestyle. He is joining us from Costa Rica. He works at Bibliosphere. In the past, he's worked in the UAE as VP Head of Engineering, leading a team of 150 people. And he founded a volunteering movement to clean up trash from nature with more than 120,000 people. And now he's running a startup for sharing printed books. Denis?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this talk. I think I'm quite a strange, I would say, example of combining the high-tech IT things with a very grounded farmer's lifestyle. And I see a lot of benefits of that. I even saw that before, but with COVID, I really saw the benefit of such lifestyle, and that's what I wanted to share. So you already presented my background. So I was a senior manager in UAE, living in different parts in Western Europe, in Southeast Asia, and then in Middle East, and then now I'm in Central America. And basically, if you read Nassim Taleb book, he introduced or he promote this dumbbell strategy, so-called. So if you look at the things, they apply to investment, but I apply the same to my personal life. Like there are something which is low risk and low return. There are something like a medium risk and medium return, and there are something which is high risk, high return. And like in the investment, it's like recommendation of investing into the equity, and then like real estate, which is low risk, and then in a startup, which is high risk. I apply the same to my life. So my low risk project or my low risk activity is my garden, and my high return activity is my startup. And if you look at the middle, what is in the middle? In the middle is all kind of employments or working for a big company where you are not going to be a millionaire working in a company, and you are not really protected. So something happened and you are fired, and you don't control basically your life. So and that's how we start, or that's what I start envisioning 2.5 years ago, and then I will share how it works. But before that, I want to, basically, I have my garden, I have the food from my garden, so I feel very secure and very in control of the basic needs, and I have a lot of spare time or free time to do my development, to work on my startup, which is quite like a high technology startup. So, but before talking about my experience, I want to share, there is some distorted perception. Like if I'm talking to people and saying, okay, I'm growing my own food, the people saying, it's so hard. I mean, this farmer's life, it's so hard. It's so full of hard work and labor and things. But I want to highlight one thing. It's not a business for me. So the thing I want to grow is something which I grow for me and my family, but not as a production business. So why it matter? So if you look at their agriculture as a production, then you have to grow not only for yourself, you have to grow for the thousands of people. And you have to grow in a 3-4 months of like the season. You have to grow for the whole year. And like 2/3 of the food grown by farmers actually lost. I mean, it's lost because of transportation, it's lost because of their rotten in the supermarkets. So basically they have to produce like 1,000 or 10,000 more than they need for themselves, and that's made their life so hard. And I'm not targeting this, and I'm living in a country where I have like the whole year round it's a productive season, and I employ permaculture principle, so it's minimize any effort and any work in a smart way, so it's growing by itself basically. So I will give one example. Okay. The one thing, what I mentioned, like also the food I grow is not disappearing. So because it's directly from the garden bed to my table, and it's funny correlation. It's like a continuous delivery. So we are here I'm a happy customer of Bitrise, and I'm applying the same principle of continuous delivery to my garden. So that's the funny funny part. And like having the small garden, you have a benefit of using all the natural technology, and not technology, natural ways of treating treat the nature. For example, like you can see on those pictures on their left side, it's the leaves of a pumpkin plant eaten by bugs, and on the right side, it's the same plant where I treat this plant in a natural way, my way of debugging. So I mean, it's natural way how to remove or get rid of the small bugs who are eating leaves. I just pee on it. I mean it's natural. There is no like chemicals there, but it works. I mean, you can see on the picture how it works. I'm very scientific mind, so I'm testing everything. So there are some leaves I didn't do that, and some leaves I did, and you can see the difference. And the problem that the farmers on their big farms of like 100 hectares, definitely they don't have enough of their own urine to treat the nature this way. And that's a pity, and that's why we are all eating chemicals in our food. But then come to the other part of my life. So I mean, once I have my basic needs, my food supply secured, what I'm doing the application that's a book sharing app for people to share printed books with the neighbors and friends. And it has a bit of a technology there. It's computer vision. It's all in cloud. So it's employ their technology like Firebase, Flutter, Python. I'm using CI/CD for the deployment, and I'm using machine learning for image recognition. So it's quite technological stuff, and I like combining the two. And I spend probably like 2 hours a week for my garden, and then I spend rest of the time for working for my startup. And I see a lot of benefits for such lifestyle. I see a benefit of feeling secure, because like who feeds you actually controls you. And if it is your employer or investor or even clients, if you have your own startup, but you really your life depends on them, it's not a pleasant situation. But if the sun, soil, and rain feeds you, then for me at least, it's more pleasant situation and more like secure situation. I feel more safe towards possible economic crisis. And like, you know that the most of the startup, they die not because their founders are not talented. They not die because the product is not good. Almost like majority of the startup dies because the money is they run out of the money. And in my case, I mean, I rent a 2-bedroom house for, including internet, gas, water, everything, for $300 a month, with their hectare of land near this house. I mean, I live very cheap life, very inexpensive life, and I can work on my startup as long as I wish. So basically, I don't have a limitation of this limited runway. I don't have to chase investors to give money to develop my startup, and I have my healthy food. So basically, that's it. What I wanted to share. That's my contacts. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions about this lifestyle, the advantages and the difficulties of such lifestyle.
I do have to say, I haven't heard of a unique comparison like that when it comes to CI/CD ever, and I absolutely loved it. So it was very interesting. Yeah, I can see everyone in chat is typing interesting, super interesting. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Let's just wait a second, and if no, then we can talk a little bit later in the panel discussion. Awesome. All right. Thank you again, Denis. And let's move on to our next presenter, who is going to be Chaitanya. Chaitanya Deorukhkar, you should be able to join now.
Hi.
Hey. So a few words about Chaitanya. He's joining us from Mumbai, India. The title of his presentation is going to be Automating Everything React Native with Bitrise. He's a front-end engineer at Razorpay. He's been working with React Native for 2 years and ensured that every production app he builds uses Bitrise for CI/CD. So without further ado, stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chaitanya, and I'm a front-end developer at Razorpay. I've been working with React Native for the last 2-3 years now, and at Razorpay, we are essentially a fintech, and at the heart of it, Razorpay is a payment gateway. I've been building Razorpay's mobile app for Android and iOS for the past few months now. So today I'll be talking a little bit about how we leverage Bitrise at Razorpay to solve a lot of problems which we intended to solve using Bitrise. And ever since we went remote, how we solved a lot of unintended problems using Bitrise. So we started building our mobile app using React Native, who has a philosophy of learn once and write anywhere, which enabled us to build native iOS and Android apps and have a common shared code base for them, which is written in JavaScript and based on React. What this helped us do is leverage all the toolings around React ecosystem, and it was more maintainable because we could have a shared expertise for web and mobile, and we could maintain consistency across iOS and Android. So once we were at a space where we had an app that we can show off, we had to start worrying about distributing the app. So we started distributing the app on Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store. But it obviously came with some limitations where we had to go through a review process each time we wanted to push an update to the app, which meant our users had to wait a little bit before they could receive the latest version of our app. But thanks to React Native, what we were able to do is bundle our JavaScript code and send it over the air directly to our users. So we were able to push a lot of security features and a small nice to have over the air directly without having to wait for the entire review process. But that obviously brought us to a place that we have a lot of options to deploy these things. So we had questions revolving in deployment, like where do we deploy the next update? Should I send it to the distribution stores, or should I send it over the air directly to our users? And now we had to also make sure that our teams and all the developers in our teams need to be familiarized with all of these ecosystems of Apple, Google, and CodePush. And also we had to think about how do we manage access rights, who gets access to which dashboard, and who gets permissions to deploy things. And at the end, it was just about, should I just quit my job instead? And it didn't stop there. We obviously had to go a little bit further and think about how can we build a really good app which is well tested and we have enough confidence in deploying that app. So now we had to think about testing. So we started using Jest for unit tests and Detox for our end-to-end testing, which raised some more questions like where do we test, when do we test, should I test it while I'm deploying the feature, or should I test it after developing it, or should I test it right before I deploy my app? And even though we had testing in place, we still wanted to ensure that our users don't face any problems in production. So we wanted to monitor the crashes that happen in production. So we decided to use Sentry to monitor the crashes that happen to our users. And Sentry required us to upload source maps with each deployment, which also meant so that they can give us proper feedback on what the root cause of the crash was, and we can act on it very quickly, which also now meant that we had to think about more questions like who is going to upload these source maps. Are we going to upload these source maps after we deploy to the app stores, or are we going to upload these source maps after we make an OT update? And again, too many questions and too little answers. So now we were at a place where we had questions surrounding deployment, surrounding crash reporting and testing. So we decided to pick one thing at a time, and we started off with deployment. With deployment, the first obvious answer that came to us was automating and creating CI/CD pipelines. But what helped us answer the biggest question was something which was very unlikely. We decided to have certain standard practices, and we agreed upon some guidelines that we all will follow to deploy. And our unlikely ally became semantic versioning. So semantic versioning helped us resolve our question of where do we deploy the next update. So what semantic versioning does, it gives it lets us divide our app version into a major, a minor, and a patch. So now every time we had to make a deployment, if our next update is going to be a major product overhaul, it's going to change our UI or our UX entirely, or we're going to introduce a major new feature that's going to be very marketable and groundbreaking, then we increment our major version of the app. And this means that this next update will go to our distribution stores, that is the Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store. If it was native only changes, that is changes only for Android or changes only for iOS, then we would increment our minor version, which meant that this next update will go to our distribution stores, App Store, and Google's Play Store. But if our changes are JavaScript only, which means it's probably just a security update or it's a minor feature update, then we would increment a patch version, which meant that this will allow us to deploy our update directly to our users. We can just push an over-the-air update using CodePush. And this also meant that this new patch update will go not only to the user with 1.1.0, but everybody with 1.1.x. So what it meant was if we were deploying a new update of 1.1.4, it would go to all the users from 1.1.0 to 1.1.3, not to the users above it who are on 1.0, or to the users after it who are on 1.2. It would only target this one segment of 1.1.x. So using semantic versioning, what our developers now had to think about was just simply answering 3 questions before they make a new deployment. Is this a major product overhaul? If yes, then increment the major version and make it from 1.0.0 to 2.0.0. Does this contain some native changes for Android or iOS? Then increment the minor version and make it 1.1.0. Or is this JavaScript only changes? Then we can just update the patch version and make it 1.0.1. So thanks to semantic versioning, we were able to answer our question of where to deploy the next update. But now that we had agreed upon certain rules that we are going to follow to decide where our next update is going to be, we also needed a tool that would help enable us to implement all of these theoretical things that we just came up with. And thankfully, Bitrise was our solution, and Bitrise helped us build workflows and CI/CD pipelines around the theoretical solutions that we had. So using Bitrise, we created a workflow called deploy, which based on the app version, the semantic versioning that we just saw, will deploy to Apple's iOS, Apple's App Store, Google's Play Store, or directly send a code push to our users. So if we look into the deploy workflow a little bit, we had small workflows inside our deploy workflow, so which started with a workflow called common, where we clone our Git repository and install our node dependencies. Then we do our configuration where we set all our environment variables and configure our Sentry properties to point it to production. And then we run our tests here right before we deploy it. We'd run our unit tests with Jest and our end-to-end tests with Detox. And once the tests are done, we'd deploy it to Android, iOS, or code push depending on the version of the app. So if you look inside each of these Android, iOS, and code push, they had very similar steps within them. Each of them would build the app. In case of Android, it will build an APK. For iOS, it would build an IPA. And for code push, it will just create a JavaScript bundle. And once it has done that, it will deploy it to the respective stores. And in code push case, it will directly send it as an over-the-air update to the users. So because of Bitrise and semantic versioning, we were now able to answer a few more questions, like how do you familiarize everyone with ecosystems of Apple and Google and code push, which meant that we didn't have to familiarize anyone with those ecosystems anymore. All they needed to be familiarized with is to create a pull request on GitHub, updating their app version, and trigger a new build on Bitrise. And we didn't even have to worry about managing access rights anymore, because now we only had to manage access rights for Bitrise. So our deployment essentially came down to doing just 2 steps. Create a pull request on GitHub, which will increment your app version to either major, minor, or patch, and then trigger a Bitrise deploy. Now we had some answers in terms of deployment, and we had to now worry a little bit about crash reporting. And surprisingly, this was the easiest problem to solve. If you remember the deployment workflow which we had. So right before we deploy our app, right after we build it, we upload our source maps to Sentry. And that's it. That's the only thing that we needed to do. And now our Sentry source maps match with the versions that our users have, and we get all the appropriate feedback from Sentry. So now we didn't even have to worry about who's going to upload these source maps anymore. And then we started worrying about testing. So if you remember, we had already seen that our deployment workflow is performing some tests right before it deploys, but that wasn't enough. We also wanted to have testing right on the PRs that all of our developers create, so that we can merge all the PRs with a lot more confidence. So thanks to Bitrise's modular approach, we just cloned our deploy workflow and just removed the actual step of deployment and just called it PR checks. And now all of our GitHub pull requests had a PR check from Bitrise, and we had a lot more confidence while deploying anything. So Because of all of this, we were able to answer all our questions surrounding deployment, crash reporting, and testing. And luckily, all of these things happened before COVID hit us. And we found all of these answers before we went remote. So, right around the corner of us answering these questions, we were hit into the world of remote work, where all of us were more or less forced to go remote and had to be working remotely. And as if already those questions weren't enough for us to answer, now we had to deal with a lot more questions that we were not at all prepared to answer, and most of us were not even experienced enough to answer these questions. And we still had to have to deal with these every single day. And it's not just those questions. We had a lot more problems that we had to worry about because of remote work. So a lot of problems, new problems were introduced in our lives, like in terms of our teams and our organizations. We had reduced communication, where some of the teams were talking too little to each other. There weren't a lot of communication going on. Or we had over communication, where the teams were talking way too much and they'd spend their entire time on meetings and never really get any work done. Or we had miscommunications, where we are not able to understand the right kind of tasks we need to perform, or we misinterpret each other's words. Then we had a lot of distractions around us. All of us were homebound suddenly, and there were a lot of distractions around us in our houses. Some of us have kids, some of us have kitchen pipes that just start leaking, that just got too personal. And some of us just lost boundaries between life and work. When you stop working, you don't really stop working. When you wake up in the morning and start working, you never really wake up or get off your bed. You just start working right there. And then we also had a lot of questions that were a lot more personal to us than to our team itself. We started wondering about lack of productivity. I saw someone in the comment section early on talking about lack of productivity. And we are just not kind enough to ourselves, and we start blaming ourselves that I was so productive before remote work started. I could do so much better, and I'm just not living up to my full potential. The reason I have it in quotes is because it's not just lack of productivity. We also have to somewhere understand that we are not just working remotely. We're also trying to survive a pandemic, and we need to be a little more kinder to ourselves. Then we had a lot more stress than we ever did before. A lot of us have to keep on wondering, will I still have this job by the end of this month? And there was naturally a lot of anxiety around us. What is happening in the world? What is happening in different countries? What's happening in my city? What's happening in my country? And the worst of all was the fear of, am I even safe where I am? Is my family safe? And suddenly these questions became so real and so valid that we had to focus all of our attention on these questions. And none of those questions of deployment, testing, and crash reporting mattered anymore. But that doesn't mean that those questions aren't there. We were just lucky enough to have solved those earlier. And now we can just focus on spending our time asking the right kind of questions and worrying about the things that really matter. At Razorpay, we were just very fortunate that we found a lot of those answers right before we went into remote work. So remote work didn't necessarily look this bloody and dangerous for us. It was somewhere in between, where we had some sort of a sanity, because we had already answered a lot of difficult questions surrounding our day-to-day jobs. And now we only had to worry about building things and about all the other questions pertaining our mental health and ensuring that we can function well even during a pandemic. So yeah, we haven't still answered all of those questions regarding our own mental health, but hopefully as time passes by, we'll get a lot of answers to a lot of those questions, and remote work could someday look like the fairy tale that we all imagine remote work to be. And we'll all eventually get there. Until then, we just have to focus on asking the right kind of questions and automate everything else that we can. That's it from my side, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chaitanya. That was a really cool presentation. I can see in the chat that everyone really loved it. We actually already have some questions, so let's dive into those. The first one, Rafi, how do bug fixes get applied across versions when using the semantic versioning? Do they get backported and applied in versions?
How do bug fixes get applied across versions when using semantic version? Do they get backported and applied in versions? Okay, so if the bug fixes are JavaScript only, which means the bugs that already existed were only JavaScript only bugs, and when we make a deployment on a patch, which is an OTA update, it goes to everyone who had the 1.1.x version. So essentially, everyone starting from 1.1.0 to 1.1.4 will now have the latest JavaScript bundle on their mobile device.
All right. Our next question comes from Shubnik, who's asking, how much time does it take for your React Native project pipelines to complete?
Right. So Shubnik, our pipelines take a little longer because we don't just do end-to-end testing and jest testing. What I didn't include in the slides that we also build our Android and iOS apps because we are just that pessimistic and we just want to be sure that nothing fails on production. So our pipelines generally go on for 39 to 40 minutes, but we can definitely improve on that in the coming future.
Awesome. All right. We'll wait just a second so that everyone can finish typing. But if there are no more questions, then we will be moving on. Thank you again so much, and talk to you later during the panel.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. So our next presenter is going to be Giorgos Ampavis. Giorgos, you should be able to turn on your screen now. So a few words about Giorgos. He is a coder and technologist and works as a VP of engineering in London and global director of client engineering at Tide. And his presentation is titled Remote Working Post-Lockdown. Giorgos?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Giorgos. I am the VP of engineering in London and the global director for client engineering at Tide, which is a London-based fintech scale-up. Today I'll be talking about remote work and how it may or may not actually work for many of us and our companies after the lockdown finishes. So, 2020, promising year for many of us, and we had many dreams, right? Many plans, and wanted many lifestyle changes. Personally, I was planning a big trip for spring, lots of summer holidays and breaks. I actually started going to the gym after 15 years in February. And then, this happened. And then shortly after, this. And my gym membership obviously was cancelled. Everything was cancelled, stopped, or postponed. And the first ones to react were the companies that could actually ensure that they had to ensure business continuity, really important for survival. And many were forced to switch to 100% remote working. Some of them had to close. But the ones that had to switch to 100% remote working, they did it even for employees that weren't allowed before due to policy, compliance, many things. Especially in fintechs, we have this. At Tide, we switched almost overnight with no issues. We were a bit prepared. So we had the infrastructure in place because we had multiple tech centers. It was slightly easier for us. At the same time, employees suddenly realized the benefits of not having to commute, myself included. I loved it. Not being distracted unnecessarily at the office, but after a few weeks, we discovered the awkward silence and isolations as well. Self-isolation is not easy. We had to change our working patterns and put guidelines and policies in place, like some previous talk said. Multiple documents was shared, like how to cope with remote working and how to adjust. This is for everyone, to help everyone to adjust to the new ways of working, right? And then after a few weeks, everything was running smoothly, and then executives started realizing that people working remotely doesn't necessarily equal decreased productivity, but actually in some cases, it was exactly the opposite. People are becoming more productive. Then big tech started making big, bold statements, announcing somehow radical changes, like allowing employees to actually work indefinitely from home. And then, of course, that had skeptics of remote work react. This won't work because no one has been successful doing that. I guess they haven't heard of companies like Basecamp, GitLab, Buffer, Stripe, many more. Stripe is not remote, but they have a remote tech center. Humans are social creatures. They need to be they need physical interaction. Well, Mark Zuckerberg disagrees. Yeah, you have social networks. You don't necessarily need interaction. Of course you do, but we'll get to that. Finally, after a few months of lockdown, the world is about to open up again, and everyone is starting preparing for the next day. But the next day doesn't mean we get to go back to exactly how it was before. Social distancing is here to stay, right? Especially without the vaccine in the horizon. Even after the vaccine comes, it's pretty safe to say that we won't back to normal. A hybrid model has to be adapted. Many companies, including mine, we are looking into how to make it work. There's no other way around it. Changes will be required. Not everybody will be allowed to go back at the same time. And, the changes, they're not going to be only physical, but also will have to be mindset changes, but also behavioral changes. Will that work, though? Well, yes and no. Remote working during lockdown and when everyone is remote is not the same as remote working after a lockdown. And when some people go back at the office and some stay remote, it's not the same, right? Having everybody remote or some of your people remote. Any issues you have, cultural, behavioral, managerial issues, anything you had before now is magnified. And this is now the unique opportunity for everyone to fix them, to find them, identify the issues you had, and fix them. So many companies will be forced to try remote working, of course, and many will fail. Companies will fail to make it because they're having managers that micromanage, they don't trust employees, they don't know, or they just don't measure performance. They don't have clear targets, and the various teams are misaligned, and they don't have any goals. They have a silo culture. Most importantly, their leadership is skeptical on remote work. They haven't been convinced yet, and prefer seeing people sitting at the desk. They feel safer this way. They're also impatient because this requires, any change requires patience, any adoption. And the last thing is they silently promote favoritism. Their employees who continue working remotely will start again having a fear of missing out, of not being promoted because they're not in the office, not being appreciated because they're not at the office, or because somebody else is closer to the managers. Physical connection will make an appearance again if we don't tackle it. So these companies will soon blame remote working, though, for everything. Any attrition they have, the high turnover, the missing targets, this is the first to blame, the scapegoat, and they won't commit to it further. They will, of course, revert back to the old ways. They will continue to struggle, maybe not in a very visible way, or maybe just their employees will struggle or underperform in this new landscape. More importantly, they will miss the golden opportunity to change the ways of working and the company culture for the better, right? But who will succeed? The companies who trust their employees and they know how to measure individual, team, or organizational performance, the ones with a clear strategy and goals, and with teams fully aligned on a common mission, the ones who promote a collaborative and inclusive environment for all of the employees, the ones where the leadership has bought in on the idea, they are committed, they are investing, and they also have the patience to wait for the results. And finally, the ones with meritocracy and equal opportunities for all. So they don't rely on seeing people next to them to actually see the value. And they will be the ones who will benefit more in the long term, and they will transform the organization. So, quick summary. Things are changing, whether we like it or not. Many changes are coming. Remote working is not a new thing, though, and companies have adopted it in the past, 100% or in a hybrid mode. Of course, the hybrid mode is a bit more challenging, and we should be ready, agile, and we should prepare for the new landscape. And my advice is look at what's not working now that everybody's remote and find the root cause of it and fix it. Communication is number one, probably. That's where most of the problems start. And trust your people. If you're a manager, trust your employees. Make sure everyone is aligned towards a common goal. Be very clear on the expectations, measure and optimize your performance, and communicate very clearly and regularly. Over-communication actually is not a bad thing. During a lockdown, it's actually a good thing. And we do try it at tight. Be patient. It will take time, and some changes require a lot of effort. That applies, of course, in a non-lockdown. When you try to switch to remote, you have to be patient. Don't give up with the first setback, but persist. And you have nothing to lose, but many things to win. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Giorgos. That was I like people in chat are saying. I definitely agree, and those are some very good tips and advice for people to consider in this situation. All right, let's see if anyone has any questions, and if not, then we will be moving on to the panel discussion. We'll just wait a couple of seconds. In the meantime, I am going to start putting everyone in presenter mode. And let's see how that works. Bear with us for just a second, folks, because this is the first time that we're doing this live, but it should work just fine. If we don't have any other questions, then thanks, Giorgos, and let's move on to the panel discussion. So we'll first talk a little bit about our past experiences. So I don't know if with remote working, I don't know if any of you guys want to set that one out specifically. Chaitanya, can you hear us? Are you over here? I will open a private chat. Were you? Okay. While I figure this one out, can you tell me a little bit about like your past experiences? Has everyone here worked remotely in the past? Is there anyone who hasn't worked remotely in the past out of the four of us?
Yeah, I have. In the past. It was a nice experience. I can't say it was brilliant, but it was a nice experience. Learned a lot, learned how to communicate. But I wouldn't call it a success. So, that's where I'm a bit skeptical sometimes when remote work, if you don't have the conditions, if the conditions are not met. It's not just magical.
All right. I've actually worked remotely in the past before joining Bitrise, but it wasn't full on remote. So I've a lot of companies have this 1 or 2 times per week. I wouldn't necessarily call that remote. It's just like home office. But basically every place that I've worked with so far had something like this. For me, it wasn't that big of a transition. But what about you guys? Like, what was the transition like? What was the worst aspect of it, for example?
Well, I think back in the day, I actually had a job where I worked mostly from home. So therefore, I was quite prepared for that, to be honest. But in the end, the problem was actually that as I told you in my talk already, that we had difference of opinions regarding homework or working from home in general. So the problem was that the productiveness basically was really going down because, as Chaitanya really put it quite well, the right questions were finally asked. So we really had to find our rhythm in working together before we actually could start being productive again. So this was quite challenging, especially for many people that were used to basically just visiting each other in their breaks or everything like that. So to adapt from the very social being at the office to be quite anti-social, I stay home and see just only my screen, let's say. This was quite a challenge for us.
I was working before in my corporate past. I was working on one project remotely, so it was a combination of a consultancy work from home plus site visits once in a couple of months, and I pretty liked that experience back then. And then for now, I switched from the corporate work to the solo entrepreneur thing. So and that's became 100% online, remote. Basically, I'm working for myself, doing collaborating with some people remotely, but no office at all. I like it more, compared to the corporate. I don't know, but it's different because in the corporate it was a big team of 150 people, and now it's I'm collaborating with two, three people. So it's different, and it's hard to compare. I don't know, will it be possible to grow to the size of 150 people with remote? But it's not the question for now. It's a question for coming years. Okay, while you are fixing this, I have a question to Giorgos. So if you don't mind, so my question, because you touch it in your presentation, but how do you see it, a really long term? Do you foresee any I don't know, second wave of the coronavirus, or do you foresee any economical crisis? So because you were talking only about from inside of the perspective of the remote work from the inside of the company, but do you think something external may happen that also force companies to go to remote?
But it has happened, right? So
it has happened once, but it might be a perception that okay, it's over, it's done, or it will be economic situation and the market situation will be different. So do you see any a strong external drivers for remote work?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, one of the first points is any company should ensure business continuity. Now, this is a lesson learned now. Every company, even the ones that were prepared, going forward, even if anything doesn't happen, they will be prepared. So because it has happened once, so it can happen anytime. So I don't see any company not ignoring it in the future. They will have to have some contingency plans in place,
I think one main point, what was basically also a lesson learned, was that processes that weren't digital before are digital now. So we cannot revert back to our old ways, I guess. So when this pandemic is over, I think many processes will be digital, and I think remote work will be one of the main focuses now in our workforce, I think, and our future.
Yeah, I can tell you, for example, we have 3 offices and we do collaborate remotely, daily basis. I go on meetings daily, even before coronavirus. So for us now, this is a wake-up call. We had issues before and we couldn't solve them because we didn't pay attention to the issues. We didn't have an inclusive environment, and myself included, I made many mistakes with my people, right? Now I realize that this is not the case. This is actually, we need to pay attention to this Small things before, big things now, and it's a lesson learned. Like you have to. I mean, you can't go back. The companies will go back, right? Don't get me wrong. Not everybody will follow, but if you're careful, then you'll see what you need to change. In some cases, you will go back wherever it makes sense. But the bad things, you should fix them, and companies will do that.
I'm actually also here. I managed to fix it, so I'm here with you guys. Thank you for taking over for the time being, and you're awesome. Yeah, I actually I was wondering. I wrote this in chat, like whether we could talk a little bit about like how this change has like affected. We heard a little bit about productivity throughout the presentations, but like your working hours, for example, because I know that a lot of people I know have been struggling when it looked like at first that it would be awesome that they're at home and that they can like do their work whenever, but it really turned out to be like them working for longer than they used to while they're in the office. So do you feel like something like that even though like you're doing what you should be doing, it just seems like you're working for 12 hours instead of 8 or something like that?
I can answer. I start those remote working like 2.5 years ago, and I think I kind of find. I mean, it takes some time to find the right rhythm for me to combine the time I spent for the work and the time spent with family and my son. I think definitely I'm working less than I was working during my corporate job. So I think I'm working like about 4 hours a day. I think, it's a good question. It's not about remote. It's not because of remote. I think it's more because of I'm self-employed and I can plan my activities. But I think like being remote and work from home, I save time on commuting. I can plan my time. I can plan my meeting and like have some part of work and then spend time with my son and then work again. So I mean, it plays naturally.
Yeah. Right. Denis summarized everything. He said everything. I used to go to the office 4 days a week at least. So this is for me is a big saving. And I do invest the time in other things like other exercise, classical stuff that you've been reading elsewhere. But productivity, I have to say, that's actually has improved a lot. Because I was prepared, like I knew what was wrong with my productivity. So I took advantage of things. I actually have my list actually going down now, my to-do list. So instead of actually increasing, before. And, social interaction, the lack of social interaction actually has helped me.
Right. Well, Dennis, wait, I'm actually pulling in Chaitanya. Sorry, just for a second. You should be able to join just in a second. Yep, you're in. So how about you, Chaitanya? What do you think? Actually, like I've heard a lot of people that I know who already worked remotely before this, like specifically said that this isn't because of remote working. This is because of the pandemic, because you're not actually going outside other than like working. So there's that. But hey, Chaitanya, how about you? What about productivity or working hours?
I think in terms of productivity, there has been a little bit of hit, at least in my case, because not all of us had the remote setup. For instance, right now I'm connecting with you guys using my mobile hotspot, and there's not a lot of work from home setup that a lot of guys already have at their houses, and we were relying a lot on our offices. So it becomes a little difficult to transition from that to your bed where you just have to sit and work now. So in some cases, productivity could go down, and we just have to be a little more empathetic towards that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rick actually brought up the point of like how this shifted the diversity of teams, and like
Right.
how do we expect that, you know, not having to be in a specific spot, for example, in San Francisco, and you actually mentioned this as well.
Yeah.
That I think that is actually one of the best aspects of this situation that could have happened, because it opens up a lot of possibilities for a lot of people, you know. I'm actually curious how that will go after the pandemic ends. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Do you think companies will revert back into that, or do you think that they'll just like keep their options open? Giorgos, I see you smiling. What do you think?
I think people need to be smart and take advantage. And you know, it's not a new thing, right? Like Stripe, I think they started an experiment in 2019. 1 year ago, I was listening to a webinar from Stripe, one of the engineers, and they opened up a tech center, a fifth tech center, which is everybody's remote, completely remote. So this is an experiment for them, and it's actually working really well. 1 year later, they actually said they're really happy with it. So it's not a new thing, right? This is just now it's been forced. So whoever didn't dare to do it before, now they have an excuse to do it, and at least try it. And you know, it's actually now you can convince easier. It's easier to convince your CTO, your CEO about the benefits of it, because they can actually see it. No, not having to pay a 400 people office in Liverpool Street, but pay like 100 people office in Liverpool Street might make a big difference.
Yeah, I see that in a lot of companies that that is a factor.
So I actually know a few people who had very strong opinions revolving remote work and how they would never even think about going completely remote for their company because it just didn't work. And now that they've been forced into remote work, they've come to realize it's actually not that bad. We can actually work this way.
Right. Jan, how about you? I'll actually switch out Giorgos, you with Denis, because he's telling me that he has some comments on it, and then we can switch again. Just a sec.
Yeah, well, Giorgos kind of summarized it perfectly. So I think that companies, my company they were quite reluctant to do any home office at all. Now they're actually seeing the benefits. And now I think when I left them, they were actually trying to think of a model how to implement home office permanently. So I think there will be some things in the future where more diverse teams will happen. But to be honest, it is a long way actually, because the structure is different now. So because we were being forced into everything, we had to do everything as fast as possible. And if that will end, then we have to think about, are the structures that we actually have right now in place, are they the right structures, or do we have to switch them in order to be better? Because now everyone is like distracted by the virus and everything going on right now and with the numbers. But after that, then you can actually try to see the advantages of remote work and how they can impact your business.
Yeah.
So Jan, regarding your point of seniority roles, you mentioned how it was a little difficult earlier to approach someone at a senior level because of their roles. But does that change now in a remote world? Does that become a little more difficult, where you have to think about should I disturb this person even if they're a senior or my peer, just because they might not be available or they might not be comfortable to get on a call right now? Does that cause more friction now?
Great question. So I don't think that. So the thing about that is that when you went in the office, for example, you of course heard from the office, from the floor, I guess, who's the senior, who's the junior, and everything like that. But now with remote, it's kind of a new anonymity, I guess. So everyone just writes anyone. So I think remote work actually makes people more approachable, especially when they actually have the sign is green, because then you say, well, he's green, so I can ask him something. You know, I have to take the chance basically. While when you're in an office, for example, you see he's busy, or I don't know what you see, and then you would say, well, maybe I can not disturb him right now. But with the anonymity of remote office, then I think there are actually the more people got approached. So I really noticed that more people got into talking with each other, and more people actually talked a bit longer than usual. So they called each other and everything. So I think remote work helped to make people more approachable, and people got the mindset that, especially in this time, maybe if I want to ask someone something, as you put it quite well, maybe I ask different questions first, and I just speak to him maybe just because I hear his voice or I hear her voice, and we can speak about stuff other than developing or anything like that. So I think remote office really helped with that social aspect of working together.
Right. We can speak a little bit about communication. Dennis actually had a point about the future, right? Dennis?
Yes, yes, that's correct. So we were discussed before more from the company perspective, but what I want to add is like a personal perspective, like comparing when we were living in Dubai, we pay like $2,000 per month for our apartment, and here in Costa Rica we are paying like $300, so almost 10 times cheaper, and we have the surfing. A surfing break, like a world-class surfing break, just like across the road, and we have the waterfalls just 5 minutes walk from my home. And while all my friends sitting locked down in their apartments, I was bathing in the waterfalls like every day with my son, and I have a mango, banana, and guava just in my garden, so I can go and pick it. And I mean, it's so much personal benefit. And I mean, the school which we have here, it's amazing school. It's better than any school we found in Dubai, and it's cheaper, like 4 times cheaper than in Dubai. So then I mean, tell me, why should I live in a big city with the traffics and like crazy expensive life if I can work remotely? So we didn't touch this aspect.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I love nature myself, and that's the possibility of that, being a thing for people now is great. Actually, we had a comment in the chat from Arpad who mentioned that he has many colleagues, Facebook, who want to move away to the mountains or next to a lake, basically anywhere outside Silicon Valley to get away. And obviously, like the monetary factor is also in there, because we all know that the Silicon Valley is not the cheapest place, for example, to be. But yeah, this is basically the beginning of a new era, and it's really interesting to see whether companies will adopt that in the long run. Yeah. So I'm actually going to invite Giorgos in again. I'll pull you back in a second, Chaitanya. I want to talk a little bit about the communication. Giorgos, you're up. I'm just trying to rotate everyone nicely. And I'll actually, Rick, if you're here, I would like to pull you into this one as well in just a bit. So this actually relates to your presentation, Jan. You mentioned the technical versus non-technical questions that were happening. The difference that came to be when COVID hit and everything went wild. So I thought that the others could share a little bit about their experiences. Did you also feel the same, that once everyone went home and started working from home, the questions kind of shifted from an almost always really technical aspect to just like these kind of social and how do we work related, or was that less of an effect for you? Oh, Giorgos, we can't hear you. Dennis, how about you in the meantime?
You see, in my recent startup, I don't have much communication. So I was living like last 2 years quite an isolated lifestyle anyway. So I just have a couple of like outsourcer or like people I not regularly giving some tasks. So I mean, not much communication. I mean, work related communication. So hard to comment.
Okay, Giorgos, how about you? We still can't hear you. I'll log you in again. That usually solves it. In the meantime, I'll actually pull Rick in instead of you, Dennis. Then and let's
sure.
Let's see what he has to say. Does it work now, Giorgos?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question because I lost you for a second?
Yeah. So in Jan's presentation, it was discussed that when everyone went home and started working remotely due to COVID, the general communication that happened in the company kind of shifted suddenly from everyone always has very specific technical questions to, like totally non-technical ones and ones that are like, how do you stay productive? What do you even do in this situation? Did you also feel that shift?
So to be fair, we have a work from home policy anyway.
Okay.
So people are somehow used to that. It's not a new thing. The new thing is that everybody had to switch remote. But the first 2 weeks, everybody was discussing about, we were trying to help, all the managers were trying to help people. I mean, even from the top down, we had like conversations, even on senior leadership about how to help people, like mental health, all that stuff, everything that comes together. So there was a small percent of discussions happening around that. But we were very busy anyway, so there's no time to actually slow down or do any. I mean, we have to go back to business as usual as fast as possible. So, I mean, yes and no. In the beginning, now it's natural. Like, we don't even talk about it. It's like it's now the new norm for us.
Right, but it seems like that out of like all of us, you were probably, in terms of the company, the most well-adjusted then in those terms, right? So it wasn't that sudden of a.
I honestly say that we switched overnight. Like, we literally went from, I went on a Thursday. I was actually on a small team that was sent home earlier for business community, and then a few days later, like 2 or 3 days later, like it was the whole company. But it was like overnight. But everybody was very prepared, so we were expecting it.
Right. No, that's actually the best possible outcome, I guess. Rick just joined, so he'll be able to talk a little bit about what happened at Bitrise instead of me.
So internally, we started using OKRs, I think, like last year-ish, to varied success. There are a lot of different interpretations of the system. OKRs, for people that don't know, is like objectives and key results. So you take a period and take an objective, you define a bunch of key results. And our Q1 objective was to become better organized and more data-driven. So what we started doing in Q1 was documenting all our processes. And we finished that, and then the COVID thing happened. So we actually already had the guides, the processes written out. And then I think it took us a weekend to decide to just move everybody remotely very early on, because we could kind of see the signs. We're a distributed team in the sense that we have a bunch of different locations. So governments were responding differently in different places. And we figured that instead of having this organization that's split out between some people being in the office and some people being remotely, and then there being this uncertainty of when we would go remote or when we would be able to go back, we decided to just use a weekend to write, I think, like a 25-page going remote guide. And then the next week, move everybody remote. And initially, we thought we would have like this transition period. That was almost non-existent. Like, people just went into the office and picked up their stuff and didn't go back. And I think for the first couple of months, going back was a big topic. Like, when are we going to go back? When are we going to be able to go back? What will it look like when we go back? So I think like a couple of weeks ago, just to get rid of the ambiguity, we decided to be remote until the end of the year, at least, so that for all the stuff we have to take care of and all the uncertainty and all the questions, at least that uncertainty is gone. And then we can just spend like the next couple of weeks or next couple of months to become a very, very effective remote organization instead of continuously having the discussion.
Yes, Dennis actually has a question for you, Rick. Do you keep all your offices or planning to minimize size and number of offices?
Yeah, it's difficult to say at this point, to be honest. Because I think it was Chaitanya who made the point, and I quoted him on Twitter, that what we're doing is we're not working remotely, we're working remotely during a pandemic. I'm not entirely sure what all of this will look like when things are quote unquote back to normal. Because actually, I agree, things won't be, they won't return to pre-COVID, but there will be some semblance of normalcy. And then the question, well, one of the questions, for example, that we ask as a leadership team is it entirely fair for us to force everybody into a full remote organization while that wasn't necessarily what people signed up for? For me personally, it works out. I'm fine. But not everybody is. And then like just taking the entire team and telling the company, well, we're remote now, that's not entirely fair. So I don't think we entirely figured that out at this moment.
Right. All right. I think we'll talk just a little bit. We're running a little bit late, but we'll talk a little bit about the technical aspects, whether anything's changed for you guys there. Thank you, Rick. I'll actually kick you out now. Bye. No, but really, thank you for joining again. And I'll actually be pulling in both Chaitanya and Dennis and Jan. I'll be putting you out for a little bit.
Sure.
And then we can switch again. So, Dennis, he should be able to join as well. Yeah, these are really the last questions because we are running late. But Dennis, let me know if you're here. So I just, like, obviously us as a CI/CD service, this is always something that we're interested in. But like, how has this affected your use or choice of tools or services? How has your automation changed, for example, your testing, anything like that?
So it hasn't changed as much for us, but it has become a lot more relevant and more important now than ever, because earlier we could just be besides each other and talk about what's working, what's not working. But now we have to rely entirely on data, on crash reports, on analytics, so that we can work asynchronously rather than having synchronous conversations with each other.
Right. How about everyone else?
So in our case, I don't think it has made any difference. Like I said, the only thing probably is communication. We have improved. It has improved a lot. So we probably fix issues that we couldn't fix in the past with communication. Like, we're using Zoom, but now everybody's using Zoom from his own Mac or their own laptop, so it's easier. Before we had to rely on meeting rooms on Zoom there, and that's always problematic. People couldn't hear us. Now we don't have these issues. Everybody's like good connection almost all the time. Good mics, like so there's no issues. Actually, has improved a lot. But other than that, automation was a big part of our pipelines. I mean, or our automation pipelines was a big part anyway before, so we didn't I don't see any difference there.
All right. Dennis?
Yeah, I have no difference. I mean, even before COVID, like when I started my startup, I love the remote things. I love automation. I love automated testing, continuous integration. So for me, it was from the beginning. I was like dreaming about the company, build it in a very like automated, continuous integration, continuous deployment approach. So I was aiming that before, and with COVID, no changes. But yeah, for me, this part is very important to have automated deployment, auto tests, and be able to be remote.
Right. All right. I think we'll just pull Jan in real quick, and then that's going to be it. Ooh, well, our chat is blowing up. I'll actually be closing this soon, but Chaitanya, you'll be back in a sec. Jan, you should be able to turn it on now. Hi.
Hi.
Can I
Sure. Go ahead.
Can I comment about this message from Melissa? I mean, yeah. I very much agree that there like a fully remote things might like this real communication is very important, and that's definitely a point here. So again, in my ideal case, I don't know, it's again might be a dream, but my path, I would prefer to have like probably key small team living together or living close by. So that's like instead of living in a big city and then commuting an hour to be in office to spend the time together, it's really can be the eco village or eco lifestyle at the nature side, where you have like several people with whom you committed to work long time, and you committed to work like together, and then you interact. You have a live interaction, real interaction with such people, and then you have online interaction with like other teams in the company who are probably like in other locations. So I don't know if it's possible or not, but that's what my dream is, and that's how I'm going to build and develop my company.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I actually agree and disagree with Melissa. Yes, I mean, sure, written, but nobody's talking about just written communication, right? We're talking about video communication as well. Video is important, of course. If everybody was in a lockdown, remote working, and we had to communicate only with emails, catastrophe. We wouldn't do anything. But now we have video. Like this is a different medium, right? So do we really need to be next to each other to understand each other? I don't think so. I mean, personally, I don't. I think it's a personal thing as well. For me, it's not a necessity. It's okay to have it, but it's okay not to have it as well. Like I have people like in how many locations? 4 locations now. I do communicate by video, most of them. We do onboard people remotely as we speak now. So, and we did well actually. Actually, we did better than before because we pay more attention now. So, it's not just written communication. We don't use written communication. It's just for documentation.
I think also I want to comment that it's certain like different circles around you. Like it's a close circle with whom you really want to communicate. And I mean, it's an example from the personal life, but what I found when I start living this like more isolated life, I found out that I became more picky about whom I communicate with. So like before that, I have like 5,000 people, 5,000 friends on a Facebook, talking with this and that, and also some social events, meeting their the people and chat with them and spend my time. And then I start value my time more and really pick people who are really really sharing my values. So I now it's less people, but deeper and more valuable communication. And that's a private part, but I mean personal life. But I think something similar might happen also in a work relationships.
Let's turn back a little bit to Jan. So back to the technical aspects. Has anything changed? Or because it seems like not a lot has changed for most folks. What about you?
To be honest, not really. We use Bitrise as well as our building pipeline. So everything was in the cloud anyway. So we really, when we set up the project, we really emphasized on, we focused the project on being available remotely, just because maintenance costs and everything like that. So this played very good. This played very good for us. So therefore, it was quite easy for us to maintain everything remotely. And we actually found tools before COVID actually happened, like Visual Studio Live Share, that could potentially help us in being better at our job and being better in our job remotely, I guess. But of course, like when you start using Teams, for example, Microsoft Teams or Slack as your only way of communicating, this of course has some challenges. But I think it was not that bad as it could been. Yes.
All right. Fair enough. That's actually really good to hear that it hasn't been that bad for everyone in terms of the technicals. Okay. Well, I think that's all the time that we actually had today. It's even more time, but I'm really happy that everyone joined us. Thank you for everyone speaking. Chaitanya, thank you as well. I'll actually just be closing this down right now for the outro, but thanks everyone for joining, and thank you to all of our viewers as well. I have a couple of last thoughts that I'll be sharing. As I said in the beginning, we will have our fourth online Bitrise user group on the 2nd of July. We already have the registration link open, so you have it in the chat. Click on it, and then see you next time. You can also visit our public Slack to just continue the conversation, or take a look at some of the links that were included during the webinar. We always love to hear what you think about the meetup. So if you have any thoughts, I've posted a feedback form. Please just let us know. We're also always looking for more speakers for our upcoming bugs. So I've also posted the speakers registration form in there. And last but not least, if you have any questions or you just want to shoot me a message, you can follow me on Twitter, and then we can talk. So that is it for today. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and see you next time.